James B. Lewis has spent nearly 40 years in public service here in New Mexico at the local, state, and federal levels. He wraps up his 2 terms at the state treasurer's office this month, where he instituted reforms following a major corruption scandal that landed his predecessor in prison. It's the second time Mr. Lewis was asked to step in to reform that office, but he's also served numerous other roles throughout government and has gained a reputation for integrity and honesty that is rare these days among political figures. I sat down with him to recall his career and talk about what's next for him and for New Mexico. James Lewis, 40 years of public service you're coming up on, and it's almost over. An amazing circumstance. Did you ever think you would be here at this moment, having a final interview and thinking about your career in the past tense?
Well, I really did, and time had just flown by. Yeah. You know, as a little kid growing up in South Broadway, and originally, for a native of Roswell, when I started schools, schools were segregated.
Right.
And I came here, and they were integrated, so it was really a culture shock. So I'm standing on the shoulders of a lot of pioneers that opened up a lot of doors.
Right.
And working in city, county, state, federal government, it's been a wonderful journey.
It's an amazing thing you just said, city, county, state, federal government. You have done so many different things over the time I've been able to watch you as a political watcher here. Where did you start, and take us through the progression of where you've ended up here, of course, as treasurer for our state, but where did it start for you here in New Mexico?
Well, originally I ran for county treasurer, and that was started back in 1980. And the reason why I decided to run, I just woke up one day. I was working with the district attorney's office, Ira Robinson and Steve Schiff, for about 5.5 years. And I had heard all these derogatory things about city government, county government, state government, federal government. And I said, either you're part of the problem or part of the solution. So, and I remember what John Kennedy once said, ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country. So I went home and I talked to my wife and I said, I want to run for county treasurer. And she looked at me and said, you want to do what? And so then she was one of my biggest supporters, because she was a preacher's kid. And therefore she didn't meet a stranger, and she was a nurse as well. So we as a team, you know, a guy by the name of Ben Trop, Jewish individual, saw me walk in the corridors of the courthouse, said, if you ever decide that you want to run for public office, come and see me. Now, this was 5 years later. He said that I went to see him. He said, I'll pay for your announcement party. You can do all your mail outs. And so we won that race. But I was told that no African American had ever run countywide, and you probably could not do that. So we showed that we could do that. We had tremendous numbers on the west side. People like Bingaman, who was running that year, and Tony Anaya, who was running that year. That was a class that I was in. Wow. We did tremendously on that side. So after, and those were 2-year terms, then Tony Anaya appointed me as state treasurer back in December 1985. And I ran for a full 4-year term in 1986. They also amended our Constitution in '86. When I left the treasurer, Governor Bruce King called me. I had run for Congress. We lost the primary by 285 votes. And Bruce King called me and said, I'd like to talk to you, after he won the governor's race and in 1991. And so I went to visit with him, and he said, I'd like for you to be my chief of staff. I said, well, Governor, what does that really entail? And his favorite saying, you know. Right. And I said, well, let me go home and talk to my wife and see if that's really what we'd like to do. And he called me at 8 o'clock the next morning and said, I'm having a press conference at 10 o'clock and I expect you to be there. I want to make the announcement. So that's how that was. Then Rio Rancho had an opening for the city manager. They had 118 people apply. They interviewed about 7 to 10. They didn't like any of them. Mayor Swistak called me and said, if I'd like to visit with you about the city manager position. He and a gentleman by the name of Mike Baker, he was a policeman, but he was the acting city manager. And I left there about 7 one evening, going to visit with him after I left Santa Fe in the Public Regulatory Commission. And I stayed there until about 10 o'clock. He called me the next day, the job is yours.
Wow.
And after that, I got a call one day from former Governor Richardson. That was before he became governor. He was a congressman, but he was serving as the Secretary of Energy. He said, the President of the United States would like to appoint you as Assistant Secretary of Energy. And I thought he was joking. So I served a little over 2 years as Assistant Secretary of Energy. Then I was recruited to come back here to run for mayor after my tenure was up there. We lost the mayor's race to Marty Chavez, and Marty said there's two people I would not hire, one being Bob Swartz and the other James Lewis. Next week he picked up the phone and called me and said, I'd like for you to be my COO. Then they had a scandal in the treasurer's office after I spent 4 years in the mayor's office. I was about ready to retire. I had just lost my wife about a month after the mayor's race, and that was really tough on me. So I decided that the staff came and asked me, said, well, Treasurer, you cleaned up the treasurer's office before, so we got two treasurers, and at that time they hadn't gone to federal pen, but both of the two previous treasurers wound up going to the federal pen.
You know, it's an interesting thing about your career as you talk about that, finishing with that situation with the treasurer's office as you came in. You've had to either, I will say, clean up, massage, repurpose, a lot of different situations that you've been in.
And I think some of the people have said they call you Mr. Cleanup. And my concern is my master's is in public administration, so I feel I have a good, strong administrative background. And I also have a bachelor's in business administration as well. So I looked at both sides of the ledger there, and also a bachelor's in education as well, and a teaching certificate. So I feel that part of my forte is to continue to coach and teach in all levels of government. And that's what I've tried to do, and tried to surround myself with some of the best and the brightest people to help me to do that.
You've had this unique situation here in New Mexico. You've been able to look at government and how it interfaces with us as a public from a lot of different levels. How have things changed from that 1980 time period when you first got into government here and up until today? Are we in a better position on our relationship with state government and how government reacts to our needs as citizens? How have things changed in your time?
Well, one of the things that I see that has changed, and even if you look at it at the federal level, I have media past president of the National Treasurers Association. We go back every year, and we always have somebody from the media come and talk to me. And with the advent of the Tea Party, with the issue that you had Tip O'Neill, you had a Ronald Reagan, they would fuss and fight, they would agree, disagree, but at the end of the day, they would look at something commonsensical, what's good for the citizens. And so they would be able to break bread. Today, you're considered the enemy if you're even sitting down talking to the person of the opposite party.
In your dealings with the public, you've had to be the stopgap person to stop corruption or from the creation of corruption, meaning running a clean office to keep things from happening. Talk about that a little bit. What's been your goal there?
Well, one of the things that I did when I went into Treasury is we wanted to be open and transparent. You know, if you realize the FBI just came in there, they took everybody's computers. That we didn't get those back to 2.5 years later. There was a lot of mistrust, distrust. So we had to look at horizontally that whole organization. We had to look at it vertically. We had to look at each one of the staff because there were silos, because people would stay in their domain. They didn't want to interact. So we had to build that up from the bottom all the way to the top. So some of the things that I did is I put together a blue ribbon committee to come in there and look at every position we had, because I didn't want to ask people to come and do something that they weren't capable of doing. We talked about ethics, and we required ethics training. We also talked about transparency, but we also put our stuff on the website because people were holding their head down. They didn't even want to say they worked in the Treasury. But those are things that we had to do. We had to build their confidence up. And the legislators, you know, we had to appear before them on what were we doing in regards to transparency about investments. The legislators, after 2 years, they didn't even call us over there anymore.
Wow.
We built up the credibility.
Yeah.
We went to each one of the Albuquerque Journal, so the media sources. We went to the Santa Fe New Mexican. We actually had open houses, inviting the media to come in and meet our investment staff, meet the other employees of the office there. So those are ways that we tried to open it up to say, this is your office. And vice versa, letting the people in the office know that you shouldn't fear
Right.
the media, you shouldn't fear the public. One of the things I did on my org chart, first thing when I walked in the office, is that we said we work for the citizens. So the citizens at the top of that org chart. And that's why we were here. That's why we're here. Is that if there was not a need for us to be in here, then there wouldn't be a need for this office. But we're the banker. And I said one of the 3 things I subscribe to. Number 1, it has to be legal. Number 2, it has to be ethical. Number 3, it has to be good for the community. Doesn't have to be good for James Lewis, but it must be good for the community.
And the things you've seen since you came in as treasurer twice over now, but this last go round, and where we are today in your view about how the money moves in our state and how the things are being paid for, how things are being settled. Where are we now as opposed to when you first came into the office?
Well, let me just say that if you realize that when Governor Martinez came in, the budget had went down to about $5.4 billion from about a $6.1 billion budget. It is back up to $6.2 billion today.
Okay.
And we have a surplus of about 260 some odd $million. Well, what that's attributed to primarily is that the oil and gas, the fracking that has gone on down in Eddy County, they're having the same dilemma that they had in North Dakota. Right now, a motel or hotel down there could cost you anywhere from $350 to $400 a night.
Wow.
And that's hurting tourism. But the oil and gas business is booming, but it's down to $60 a barrel today. So some of the revenue forecasting is going to have to be pulled back. But let me give you an idea of what that oil and gas mean. Prior to this year, the oil and gas had went down to about 15%. It's at about 31 to 32% today of the entire budget. So oil and gas is key. And when you look at the tax breaks and the big problem that the cities and the counties are having is there's been a shift from the monies that they're getting. They're still complaining about some of that. So I think it's still early to figure out what that impact is going to be. But what we have to do in this state is trying to figure out how we can diversify the economy here. Beside the big box of Intel on the hill, number 1 employer in this state is Walmart.
Wow.
I look at a couple things that we may have an opportunity. New Mexico and Wyoming are 2 of the states that have a disproportionate number of baby boomers retiring. So as we're looking at what their needs are going to be, housing, health care, all that's going to be a big thing that we need to look at. New Mexico has a tremendous opportunity in energy. And what's going on in Eddy County, we have never in the history of this state had more wells going than Lee County than what you have in Eddy County today. They have surpassed Lee County in reference to the rigs down there. So that's helping us, but we really have to decide if we can get some finance in here, financial type of institutions, if we can work with energy. You know, they're doing the algae research down in Deming area, but we got the wind energy here. So New Mexico is rich in a lot of natural resources. Another big resource that's going on is the potash down in Carlsbad area as well.
Right.
So these are things that I think that will help this economy because if we really don't do that, we've been saying thank goodness for Mississippi. 2 big drawbacks that we have in this state in recruiting jobs. Because we used to say in Rio Rancho in economic development, you can have 1,000 prospects, but you only get 2 suspects. Okay.
Right.
Or excuse me, 1,000 suspects
Sure.
and 2 real prospects.
Sure.
So, and that means that I used to go with Governor King to the national governors we used to at the National Governors Association meetings, and they used to have whole sessions just dealing with incentives. Ceteris paribus, everything being equal, what can we offer here in New Mexico that they're not offering any other place?
Right.
And so the movie industry became an entity that we became renowned for, and it has an impact on this state. So those are the types of things that we have to continue to work on. The big issue I keep saying is water. And the other big issue the other 2 issues that we have to address in this state, if we're going to attract businesses in here, is our educational system.
Right.
And if you look at between higher education, lower education, almost 70% of our state budget goes to education. So we're spending a lot of money in those areas, but is it enough? Because we still have to address the issue of poverty. Kids are not ready to learn. By 3rd grade, there is a trend of dropout. We also have to address, when you go out here and trying to recruit businesses in here, people are asking about law enforcement and the quality of life. So if they don't feel they're coming to a safe community, the businesses are not going to locate. They're not going to bring their people here.
Sure.
Because they also have kids that have to go to school. So these are the other areas that we really have to look at if we're going to try to incentivize businesses to come into New Mexico. So I think one of the things that we probably need to really start working more with is that Sandia National Laboratories used to have these incubators. And a lot of those scientists used to spin off and start businesses here. We sort of got away from that. It would be good to see that come back.
Sure. A question for you. If the next gubernatorial cycle, a group of people came to you and said, we would like you to think about running for governor here, and we would support you, much like the same way you mentioned your very first race, you had some help, some key help right off the bat. Would you think about it, running for governor?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I had about 15 legislators corral me a year ago up in the Capitol and asked me to do the same thing. My concern, I knew that this time around, you got a very popular first Hispanic female in the United States. There was a ton of money, the Koch brothers. You know, I would not rule it out. You know, I would sit down and visit, but I just told a lot of the folks 2 years ago, thank you, but no thank you at this point. And I think I need to get my battery recharged, spend that quality time with family, and then I would make a decision based upon that.
Your run for Congress early on that didn't make it, is that a possibility for you down the road?
Well, at this time, my kids and grandkids, which I have 9 of them,
Wow.
they're saying it's time to spend some time with us. So that's right now #1 on my list, is to travel a little bit and spend some time with family. And you never say never, so you leave your options open. So, you know, a lot of people are calling me about a lot of different things. I just did ethics training for all the new treasurers that got elected in the U.S. this time around. In New York last week, and a lot of them said, can you come to my office? Can you come to the state of Arkansas? Can you come to the state of Tennessee? So I was just out in California to receive an award, and the folks there, 2 or 3 folks came up and said, I got a job for you. So I think there's numerous options, but I think right now I want to say time out and spend some quality time with family.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you at all. James Lewis, I have to say, from the state of New Mexico, if I could be so bold, thank you for your service. You really did some good stuff in New Mexico.
Well, I want to thank you, and I want to thank all the citizens in the great state of New Mexico that gave me an opportunity to serve, because I don't think there's any greater honor than being elected by the citizens of the state of New Mexico to serve. So I want to thank them, and thank you for having me.
Wonderful. Good to see you.
Good night.
Best of luck in the future for sure.
Appreciate it.
You got it.